The coffee has already gone lukewarm by the time you notice it. It sits in a thick ceramic mug beside a stack of folders that do not belong to you yet. Steam long faded, surface still, a faint ring forming where time has passed unnoticed. The fluorescent lights above hum in a steady, indifferent rhythm. Somewhere down the hall, a file cabinet slides shut with a softened metallic sigh. You have been off patrol for 3 weeks now. 3 weeks since you traded the predictable motion of a cruiser rolling through neighborhoods for a desk inside the detective unit. 3 weeks since your nights stopped being measured in radio calls and started being measured in paper. The city is still the same outside the station windows, the same long avenues glowing amber beneath streetlights, the same distant traffic murmuring past intersections. But you experience it differently now. You are not circling it. You are studying it. The desk they assigned you carries the quiet history of others. Small scratches across the wood veneer, a drawer that sticks unless you lift it slightly, a worn leather chair that exhales when you lean back. You are careful with all of it, as if the furniture itself is evaluating whether you belong. You once believed investigation would feel like action slowed down. Instead, it feels like stillness deepened. On patrol, instinct ruled. You arrived quickly. You responded. You contained situations. Your body moved before doubt could settle. But here, inside this dim room lined with metal filing cabinets and softly glowing desk lamps, the work unfolds differently. You are learning to wait. The senior detectives do not rush. They sit with files open for long stretches, eyes scanning pages without visible reaction. They speak less than you expected. When they do, their voices are measured, even unhurried. Observation, you are beginning to understand, is quieter than reaction. Tonight, the rain presses gently against the station windows, tapping in patient intervals. The rhythm merges with the fluorescent buzz overhead. You turn a page in the folder in front of you, slowly, deliberately, absorbing timelines, cross-references, fragments of information that must be held carefully rather than chased. No one tells you this directly, but you feel it. In this unit, restraint is a skill. You still wear your patrol habits like an extra layer. Your back straightens at sudden noises. Your ears tilt toward the hallway footsteps. But the detectives around you remain composed, grounded, as though anchored to something deeper than reflex. You begin to imitate them. You take notes in smaller handwriting. You ask fewer immediate questions. You let silence stretch before speaking. It feels unnatural at first, like holding your breath underwater, but gradually you discover that in those pauses, details rise to the surface. The city does not reveal itself to those who hurry. Across the room, a whiteboard stands crowded with neat handwriting and lines drawn between names and dates. Nothing dramatic, just structure. A map of patience. You study it from your desk lamp's soft glow, noticing how every note represents hours of thought rather than moments of excitement. Midnight passes quietly. The building settles into its nocturnal rhythm. Patrol officers rotate shifts downstairs. Phones ring less frequently. The air carries the faint scent of paper and old coffee. You glance at the clock and realize that time here moves differently than it did in a cruiser. There is no engine vibration, no streetlights flashing past the windshield, only stillness. You miss the motion sometimes, but you also feel something else growing, a steadiness that did not exist before. Earlier this week, one of the senior detectives handed you a thin folder and said, "Read it twice." Nothing more, no explanation. You read it 3 times. The 4th time you began noticing what was not written as clearly as what was. Patterns are subtle things. They do not announce themselves. You are beginning to understand that investigations are not built on dramatic discoveries. They are built on accumulation, page by page, conversation by conversation, quiet understanding layered slowly over time. A radiator clinks softly as heat moves through old pipes. You rest your elbows on the desk and rub your eyes. Fatigue arrives differently now, too. On patrol, exhaustion came from movement, from adrenaline spent. Here, it arrives from sustained concentration, from carrying unanswered questions without resolution. But there is something grounding in that weight. When you drive home after these shifts, the streets feel almost sacred in their emptiness. Storefronts dark, traffic lights cycling for no one, the city resting. You pass beneath streetlights and realize you are no longer scanning sidewalks the way you once did. You are thinking about connections, about responsibility, about how much trust has been placed quietly into this unit. You are no longer just responding to the city's surface disturbances. You are being asked to understand its undercurrents. The senior detectives do not mentor you with speeches. They demonstrate through posture and tone. When a call comes in requiring their attention, they do not leap up dramatically. They close their folders. They stand. They move with calm intention. You follow, absorbing their pace. In briefings, you notice how they listen more than they speak. When someone else presents information, they do not interrupt. They let the room settle. They ask questions that are simple but precise. You begin practicing that too. Patience feels awkward at first, like wearing a coat that hasn't molded to your shoulders. But slowly, it fits. One evening, near the end of shift, you find yourself alone in the office for a few minutes. The others are downstairs. The fluorescent lights hum softly above you. Rain traces thin lines across the window. The city glows faintly beyond the glass. You look at the stack of folders on your desk. They do not intimidate you the way they did on your first day. They represent work, yes, responsibility certainly, but also growth. On patrol, you protected moments. Here, you protect continuity. You are learning that being assigned to the detective unit is not a promotion of speed or authority. It is an invitation into deeper responsibility. It asks you to slow down, to think longer, to carry ambiguity without discomfort. The transition is subtle but profound. You still wear your uniform, though less frequently. You still carry the instincts of response. But inside this quiet office, beneath these humming lights, something in you is recalibrating. You no longer measure your effectiveness by how quickly you arrive. You measure it by how carefully you consider. The coffee beside you has gone completely cold now. You take a sip anyway. It tastes flat, but familiar. Outside, the rain eases into a fine mist. Somewhere in the building, a chair rolls gently across tile. You close the folder in front of you and rest your hand on its cover. There is no dramatic moment marking your transition. No ceremony, just another night in the station, another stack of paper, another steady hum of fluorescent light, and you, sitting a little more patiently than you did yesterday. The desk lamp becomes your closest companion. It casts a warm, circular pool of light over reports that seem to multiply in quiet defiance of the clock. Outside that soft glow, the rest of the office fades into muted shadow. Rows of metal filing cabinets standing like silent sentinels. Whiteboards dimmed, empty chairs tucked beneath desks where other detectives will return before dawn. You have your own caseload now. Not heavy, not overwhelming, but real. Your name is printed on the folder tabs. It felt different the first time you saw that. Heavier than you expected. Not pride exactly, not fear, something steadier. A quiet understanding that the work now passes through you before it moves anywhere else. The nights grow longer in this role. You arrive before sunset, when the sky still holds a trace of pale blue, and often leave when the horizon has begun to lighten again. Somewhere between those two shades of sky, hours dissolve into the slow turning of pages, into phone calls made in low voices, into notes written carefully so they will still make sense weeks from now. The fluorescent lights hum on, constant and uncomplaining. You learn to appreciate their steadiness. There is comfort in consistency, in the unchanging buzz overhead, in the faint scent of paper and toner, in the ritual of pouring coffee that will inevitably cool untouched beside your elbow. As a junior homicide detective, you discover that listening is your most important skill. Not dramatic listening, not the kind that leans forward impatiently, but patient listening. You sit across from people in small interview rooms with neutral walls and steady lighting, and you let silence do some of the work. You let pauses breathe. You notice how voices change when they feel heard. You jot down small details without interrupting the flow of someone else's memory. It surprises you how much of this job involves restraint. Back on patrol, silence often meant tension. Here, silence can mean clarity forming. Your senior partner rarely rushes conversations. They sit back slightly, hands folded, eyes attentive but calm. Afterward, in the hallway beneath dim lights, they offer quiet observations, not critiques, not lectures, just gentle adjustments. Let them finish. Don't fill every pause. You carry those reminders like small stones in your pocket, grounding you. The weight of responsibility deepens in subtle ways. You begin waking up during the day with thoughts drifting through your mind. Fragments of timelines, unanswered questions, conversations replaying softly. Not in a way that startles you awake, but in a way that reminds you the work continues even when you are home. You develop rituals to contain it. A slow drive home through nearly empty streets. Windows cracked slightly to let in the cool early morning air. Parking beneath a streetlight and sitting for a moment before stepping out, allowing the shift to settle behind you. The city at 4 a.m. feels different than it ever did on patrol. It feels fragile. Storefronts dark and reflective. Traffic signals blinking through cycles meant for busier hours. A lone delivery truck idling somewhere in the distance. You begin to feel protective of this quiet version of the city. Inside the station, your desk accumulates small signs of permanence. A framed photograph, a heavier mug, a notebook that holds thoughts not meant for official reports, reflections, questions, reminders to yourself about tone and patience. You notice that your handwriting has changed, slower, more deliberate. The senior detectives treat you differently now, too. They no longer glance over your shoulder at every report. They trust you to draft summaries, to organize information, to prepare briefings. That trust is subtle but unmistakable. It feels like being handed something fragile. You do not want to mishandle it. Some nights are busier than others, but the intensity you once imagined rarely arrives in dramatic bursts. Instead, the work unfolds in extended stretches of concentration. Cross-checking notes, confirming times, rereading statements, adjusting timelines on the whiteboard with quiet precision. You grow accustomed to the rhythm, the buzz of lights, the distant echo of footsteps in the hallway, the soft scrape of a chair rolling across tile, the gentle thud of a file drawer closing. Each sound becomes part of the atmosphere of your new life. You learn, too, about emotional boundaries. Not walls, boundaries. There is a difference. You feel compassion. You feel the weight of loss that hovers around certain conversations. But you also learn to hold those feelings at a steady distance, to keep your voice level, to maintain clarity. Your partner once told you, during a late shift when rain streaked the windows, you can care deeply without carrying everything home. You repeat that sentence to yourself sometimes. Care deeply. Carry carefully. There is pride in small improvements. The first time you notice a pattern others have overlooked. The first time you suggest a line of follow-up that earns a quiet nod of approval. The first time you brief the unit without stumbling over your words. None of these moments are celebrated loudly. They are acknowledged with simple phrases. Good catch. Solid work, and that is enough. You begin to understand that growth in this unit is rarely announced. It accumulates the way dust settles on file cabinets, gradually, almost invisibly, until one day you realize the surface has changed. The late nights become less intimidating. You no longer glance at the clock every hour. You sink into the work. There are evenings when you pause and look around the office, noticing how each desk lamp forms its own small island of light. Each detective sits within their own circle, focused, thoughtful, steady. You feel part of something enduring, not dramatic, not loud, but necessary. One particularly quiet morning, as dawn begins to lighten the edges of the blinds, you finish organizing a case file. You align the pages neatly. You secure the folder closed. You place it carefully atop a stack for review. You lean back in your worn leather chair and let out a slow breath. Outside, the first commuter buses begin their routes. The city stirs gently. Inside, the station remains hushed, suspended in that delicate space between night shift and day shift. You realize that you are no longer the uncertain patrol officer stepping tentatively into investigations. You are a junior homicide detective. Still learning, still refining your instincts, but steady. You have learned to sit with unanswered questions without urgency. You have learned that silence often reveals more than pressure. You have learned that responsibility is not loud. It hums quietly, like fluorescent lights overhead, constant and unwavering. The coffee beside you has gone cold again. You take a sip anyway, and this time, you barely notice the taste. The chair no longer exhales when you sit down. Or perhaps it does, and you simply no longer notice. Years have passed in the soft hum of fluorescent light, in the patient turning of pages, in the quiet choreography of desks arranged beneath ceiling panels that never change. The station feels less like a workplace now and more like a second interior landscape, one you navigate without thinking. You arrive each evening with the same steady rhythm. Coat hung carefully on the back of your chair. Desk lamp switched on before the overhead lights fully register. Coffee poured and set slightly to the right of your dominant hand. There is comfort in repetition. You are no longer introduced as the junior detective. The word experienced floats around you now, spoken casually by newer faces who glance toward you during briefings. It does not feel dramatic. It feels earned slowly, through nights that blurred into mornings, through reports revised and revised again, through conversations where you chose silence over interruption. Experience, you have learned, is not loud confidence. It is quiet calibration. You notice patterns more easily now, not in dramatic revelations but in subtleties, in the way timelines align imperfectly, in the tone of a voice that hesitates for half a second too long, in paperwork that feels almost complete but not quite settled. You do not rush to conclusions. You let the patterns breathe. Your partner has changed over the years. Transfers, promotions, retirements. You have sat beside several detectives in this same office, each bringing a slightly different cadence to the work. And with each partnership you have adjusted, not losing your own steadiness but expanding it. Trust forms quietly in this unit. It grows during shared late nights when the rain streaks the windows, and neither of you speaks for long stretches. It solidifies when one of you takes over a conversation seamlessly, without ego. It strengthens when exhaustion sets in at 3 in the morning, and you both continue anyway, not out of urgency but out of responsibility. You have become someone others rely on. You notice it in small ways. A younger detective asks for your thoughts before finalizing a report. A supervisor glances toward you during a meeting, waiting for your nod. A patrol officer newly assigned to assist with follow-ups watches how you carry yourself. Not with intensity, but with steadiness. The city outside the station has changed too. New buildings rise where empty lots once sat. Old storefronts close and reopen under different names. Streetlights are replaced with brighter models, casting a whiter glow on midnight sidewalks. But inside the homicide unit, time feels layered rather than replaced. You remember where certain file cabinets once stood. You remember colleagues who have long since retired. You remember your own first nights at this desk when everything felt uncertain. Now, uncertainty is familiar. You no longer resist it. Complex cases arrive on your desk occasionally. Complex not because of spectacle, but because of intricacy. Interwoven timelines, multiple conversations, weeks of steady documentation. You approach them the same way you approach everything else. Patiently. You clear your desk. You line up your pens. You turn off the overhead lights and rely on your desk lamp's softer glow. You begin. There is something meditative about the process now. Reading, cross-referencing, pausing, looking at the whiteboard without writing anything new, letting connections settle in your mind before committing them to ink. You have learned that rushing clarity often obscures it. The younger detectives sometimes expect decisive answers quickly. You offer them something different. Let's sit with it. That phrase becomes part of your vocabulary. You sit with timelines. You sit with inconsistencies. You sit with long silences during interviews, allowing space rather than pressing for resolution. Emotional resilience develops not through dramatic moments, but through repetition, through the steady exposure to responsibility without letting it erode your center. There are nights when the weight feels heavier, not sharp, not overwhelming, but dense. You recognize it as accumulated responsibility. You manage it the way you manage everything else, methodically. A walk around the block during a break. A quiet cup of coffee in the break room while the building hums. A few moments standing by the window, watching rain thread down the glass and traffic lights blink through empty intersections. You have stopped carrying everything home, not because you care less, but because you understand sustainability. You care deeply while you are here. You release carefully when you leave. The younger detectives begin mirroring your tone. You notice them speaking more calmly in briefings, allowing pauses to stretch without discomfort. You see them watching you during conversations, absorbing not your words, but your pace. It humbles you slightly. Experience is not about authority. It is about steadiness others can lean against. One evening, long after most of the building has quieted, you and your current partner sit across from each other reviewing a file. The desk lamplight pools between you. Outside, the city glows faintly beneath mist. Neither of you speaks for several minutes. Finally, your partner says softly, "You always seem calm." You consider this. It is not that you feel calm every moment. It is that you have learned how to hold the feeling of uncertainty without letting it show as urgency. You smile faintly. It comes with time. And it does. There are evenings when multiple investigations overlap in demanding ways. The whiteboard fills with careful handwriting, dates, initials, arrows connecting pieces that must remain organized. The younger detectives glance at you when the board grows crowded, searching for reassurance that the complexity is manageable. You offer a small nod. "It's steady," you say, and it is. because you have learned that complexity does not require intensity. It requires structure. The hum of the fluorescent lights continues above you, unwavering. The rain taps against the windows on certain nights, soft and rhythmic. Coffee cools beside reports, as it always has. But now, instead of being absorbed solely in your own concentration, you move between desks quietly. A brief check-in. A subtle suggestion. A hand resting lightly on the edge of someone's desk as you review a page together. You have become attuned to shifts in tone. When fatigue begins to creep into someone's voice, you hear it. When frustration tightens a posture, you see it. You address these moments not with reprimand, but with steadiness. Take 5 minutes. Step outside for air. We'll look at it again with fresh eyes. The team reflects your calm more often than not. You notice it in the cadence of conversations, in the way briefings unfold without interruption, in the way disagreements remain respectful rather than sharp. Responsibility has expanded beyond individual outcomes. You now carry the continuity of the unit itself. Late at night, when most of the building has quieted and only a few desk lamps remain illuminated, you sometimes stand at the center of the room and observe the quiet industry around you. Papers turning, pens moving, a chair rolling softly across tile. This is what leadership looks like here. Not raised voices, not dramatic commands, just presence. There are difficult days, of course, days when the weight feels cumulative, not because of any single investigation, but because of the steady responsibility of many. On those days, you rely on routine. You tidy your desk before beginning anything new. You write clear notes for the morning shift. You walk the perimeter of the room once, checking in without hovering. You remind yourself that your steadiness sets the tone. The city outside remains a constant companion. Streetlights glow amber through rain-slicked windows. Early morning buses rumble faintly in the distance. The skyline shifts incrementally year after year, but from inside the homicide unit, the rhythm feels continuous. You think often now about sustainability, not in abstract terms, in practical ones. You encourage days off when earned. You redistribute workload when necessary. You protect your detectives from unnecessary administrative noise when you can, absorbing small pressures so they can focus. It is not about control, it is about stewardship. One evening, a junior detective lingers at your desk after others have stepped away. They hesitate before speaking. "I don't know how you keep track of all of this," they admit quietly, gesturing toward the board. You look at the writing, at the careful lines and organized notes. "It builds over time," you say. "You don't carry it all at once. You carry it piece by piece." They nod slowly. You recognize that look. Years ago, you wore it yourself. As a lead detective, your own investigative work has not disappeared, but it has shifted. You focus on coordination, on ensuring that every thread is followed with care, that no one is overwhelmed, that the process remains thorough without becoming frantic. You trust your team. Trust becomes your most valuable currency. You give it freely, but thoughtfully. When the shift winds down and the first hints of dawn filter through the blinds, you feel a quiet satisfaction that is different from earlier in your career. It is not tied to a single solved question or completed file. It is tied to cohesion, to knowing the unit moved through the night steadily, to knowing your detectives left feeling supported rather than strained. You switch off your desk lamp last. The fluorescent lights hum above as you gather your coat. The whiteboard stands filled but organized. The air carries the faint scent of cooled coffee and paper. Before stepping out, you take one final look at the room. Leadership, you have learned, is not about standing above. It is about standing among, steady enough that others do not have to be. The desk is larger now, not grand, not ornate, just broader, positioned in a small office with a window that overlooks the same city you have served for decades. From here, you can see the tops of streetlights and the slow movement of traffic below, headlights threading through intersections long after midnight. The promotion to lieutenant did not feel like a dramatic ascent. It felt like an expansion. Your responsibilities no longer rest primarily in case files stacked neatly on a metal desk. They rest in people, in systems, in the careful balance between operational demands and human endurance. The homicide unit hums beyond your office door, the same fluorescent lights buzzing softly, the same worn leather chairs creaking gently as detectives settle into long nights. But now you listen to that hum differently. You listen for strain, for imbalance, for fatigue that lingers too long. Administrative oversight sounds sterile on paper. In practice, it feels deeply personal. You review staffing schedules with the same attentiveness you once gave to timelines. You ensure no one carries too many consecutive nights without rest. You advocate quietly for resources when needed, framing requests not as demands, but as necessities for sustainable work. You sit in meetings upstairs beneath brighter lights and polished tables, speaking in the same measured tone you cultivated years ago. You translate the needs of your detectives into language that administrators understand. You protect your unit from pressures that do not serve their purpose. Leadership has become shield as much as guide. Your office contains fewer case files and more folders marked with budgets, evaluations, strategic plans. Yet even here, in this quieter administrative space, the atmosphere remains grounded. A desk lamp glows warmly beside neatly stacked documents. A ceramic mug rests near your hand, steam rising slowly before fading. You still arrive early. The habit has never left you. Before the unit fills with voices and movement, you walk through the open workspace. You glance at the whiteboards. You adjust a marker left uncapped. You straighten a stack of reports waiting for review. These small gestures connect you to the continuity of the room. The younger detectives greet you respectfully now, some with a slight straightening of posture. You respond with the same calm nod you have always offered. Titles matter less to you than tone. As lieutenant, your focus has widened beyond individual investigations. You track trends over months and years. You coordinate with other divisions quietly, ensuring communication flows smoothly without friction. You anticipate staffing gaps before they become crises. Strategic coordination is less visible than direct investigation, but it requires the same patience. You spend portions of your nights reviewing reports not for detail alone, but for clarity and sustainability. You look for signs of burnout in writing, sentences that feel rushed, conclusions drawn too tightly. You call detectives into your office not to reprimand, but to check in. How are you holding up? The question is simple. The answer matters deeply. You have come to understand that protecting the mental health of your team is not an abstract ideal. It is daily practice. It is encouraging vacation days to be taken fully. It is rotating assignments thoughtfully. It is modeling boundaries yourself. You no longer stay until dawn every shift. You leave at reasonable hours when possible, demonstrating that endurance does not mean constant presence. You trust your lead detectives to manage the room. You allow them to grow into their own leadership. The city outside your window continues its quiet transformations. New high-rises reflect the glow of old streetlights. Neighborhoods shift in rhythm. Traffic patterns evolve. Through it all, the homicide unit remains steady, an anchor point within the larger machinery of the city. Some nights, rain taps softly against your office window. You pause mid-review and watch droplets trace downward in irregular lines. The sound blends with the distant hum of ventilation and muted conversations beyond your door. You think about the years behind you: patrol officer, junior detective, experienced investigator, senior mentor, lead supervisor, each role layered upon the next, not replacing but reinforcing. Now, as lieutenant, you feel the responsibility most keenly in quiet moments, when a detective lingers at your doorway seeking advice, when a lead supervisor asks for guidance on workload distribution, when an administrator upstairs questions a resource request, and you must advocate firmly yet calmly. You have learned that authority need not raise its voice. It simply remains steady. There are evenings when you walk through the unit after midnight, checking in softly. A detective looks up from their desk lamp's glow. You ask if they need anything. They shake their head, appreciative. You notice the subtle pride in their posture. You recognize it, the same pride you once carried. Your role now is to ensure that pride is supported, not strained. In early mornings, when the shift change approaches and pale light filters through blinds, you stand by your office window and watch the city awaken. Delivery trucks move through intersections. Streetlights flicker off one by one. The sky lightens gradually, almost imperceptibly. You feel the long arc of your career stretching behind you. The years have not hardened you. They have refined you. You understand the weight of this work more fully than ever, yet you carry it with measured distribution, sharing it across capable shoulders, ensuring no one bears too much alone. When you turn off your desk lamp at the end of a shift, the office dims gently. You gather your coat, glance once more at the unit beyond your door, and feel a quiet assurance. The work continues. It always will. But under your oversight, it continues steadily, structured, supported, sustainable. And that, you now know, is its own form of protection. The office is quieter than you ever imagined it would be. Not silent, never silent, but softened. From this height in the building, the city stretches outward in long ribbons of light. Traffic moves steadily below, headlights and taillights flowing in opposite directions like patient streams. The streetlights glow warmer than they once did, or perhaps your memory has simply softened their edges. Your desk is broad and orderly, fewer stacks of paper now, more framed photographs, a small brass nameplate that still feels slightly unfamiliar, even after years in this role. Division Commander. The title carries weight, but not in the way it once might have. The weight now is perspective. You no longer manage individual cases. You no longer assign shifts directly. Your responsibilities span entire divisions, policies, budgets, strategic planning, community coordination. You sit in conference rooms where discussions stretch across citywide concerns. Yet even here, in this upper office, the heartbeat of the homicide unit remains audible to you. You visit often. You walk through the familiar workspace where fluorescent lights still hum, where desk lamps cast warm pools of focus, where whiteboards fill and clear in steady cycles. The leather chairs have been replaced more than once, but the rhythm of the room remains unchanged. You see younger versions of yourself in nearly every posture. The patrol officer newly assigned to investigations, sitting a little too upright. The junior detective staying a little too late. The experienced investigator leaning back thoughtfully before speaking. The senior mentor offering quiet guidance. The lead supervisor pacing calmly between desks. The lieutenant scanning for signs of fatigue. You have lived each of those roles. They reside within you still. From this vantage point, the city's evolution feels almost visible in layers. Buildings that were once new now blend into the skyline. Neighborhoods, once quiet, now hum with late-night cafes and shifting traffic. Entire blocks have transformed in ways you could not have predicted during your early patrol days. And yet, beneath those changes, something constant endures. The responsibility, the quiet service, the steady presence of those who work long nights under fluorescent light so the city can rest. You reflect often now, not nostalgically but thoughtfully. You remember the first time you sat in the detective unit, uncertain and alert. You remember learning to let silence stretch. You remember the first time someone looked to you for steadiness. You remember the subtle shift from solving to guiding, from guiding to protecting, from protecting to overseeing. Each stage felt gradual at the time. Only now do you see the arc. There were no dramatic turning points. No single moment when everything changed. Growth occurred in accumulation, in late-night coffee gone cold, in rain tapping against windows, in file cabinets sliding open and closed softly, in conversations held with measured tone. You have come to understand that legacy in this work is not built on headlines. It is built on continuity, on ensuring that each generation of detectives inherits not just procedures but pacing, not just authority but restraint, not just responsibility but sustainability. Some evenings, long after official meetings have ended, you remain in your office with only a desk lamp illuminated. The overhead lights are dimmed. The city glows beyond the glass. You review policy drafts or budget proposals, but your thoughts occasionally drift to the rhythm of the unit below. You imagine the hum of fluorescent lights, the scratch of pens on paper, the low murmur of measured conversation. You feel a quiet pride, not in rank, but in endurance. The work has never been about intensity. It has been about steadiness sustained over decades. There were costs, of course. Missed dinners, late arrivals home, moments when the weight felt denser than usual. But you learned early how to carry that weight without letting it define you. You cultivated routines. You honored boundaries. You allowed yourself to grow without hardening. The city shaped you as much as you served it. Empty streets at 4 a.m. taught you fragility. Rain against station windows taught you patience. Long shifts under humming lights taught you focus. Colleagues taught you resilience. You look at the skyline now and see not just buildings, but years. You see the patrol routes you once drove, the station windows where you once stood watching rain, the office where you first supervised others, the window where you stood as lieutenant, monitoring a team's well-being. Each space layered into the next. As division commander, your role is broader, but your philosophy remains unchanged. Calm over chaos, structure over urgency, people over pride. You encourage leadership throughout the department to mirror those values. You speak about sustainability in quiet, firm tones. You remind others that the work must outlast any single career, including yours. Retirement looms gently on the horizon, not imminent but visible. You do not fear it. You see it as another transition in a long sequence of measured shifts. When you eventually step away, the fluorescent lights will continue to hum. The desk lamps will glow. The whiteboards will fill and clear. New detectives will sit in worn leather chairs and learn to let silence breathe. The city will continue changing, and the steady work will endure. Tonight, you stand by your window once more. The glass is cool beneath your fingertips. Traffic flows below in patient lines. A light rain begins to fall, tracing faint patterns against the pane. You close your eyes briefly. You feel the entire arc of your career not as a series of events, but as a rhythm, a long, steady cadence of quiet service. You return to your desk. You switch off the lamp. The office dims gently around you, and the city continues to glow.